I think campaign finance reform is probably the most important thing we can do because the radical right has an alliance with corporations just like the rest of the Republicans, and that's why they have all that money to implement policies that aren't in the mainstream view. So what are you going to do there?
Well, you, I think, are probably right in a ancillary way. And here's what I want to explain about that. Secular Coalition for America, I tell you up front, we have not taken a position on campaign finance reform. But I will say, and it's just a correlation, not a causation, but that it tends to be, more or less, that those who tend to vote for more corporate power also in our Congress tend to be those who vote for a diminishment of separation of church and state. So there's a correlation, and it's a valid one. But I think we have to do two things. One, if you in your civic life want to speak out for campaign finance reform, I strongly encourage you to do that.
Yes.
There are member organizations that do it. But I also would say that we cannot be shrinking violence, and we have been. The Secular Coalition for America has as part of our business plan that we are going to start getting involved financially in elections. We can't just say, oh, woe is us. They over there are involved financially in elections. We have to be involved financially, and over this next 2 years for the 2012 elections, part of our business plan to say we're going to have political efforts like others do to sort of bundle together funds and say we're going to be involved. The majority in America do not believe in the Glenn Beck viewpoint, but they are vocal and they are organized. We need to get vocal and organized for truth, and I think we can successfully do it. So I'm asking you to also put your money on the line into this organization, into our member organizations, and do what you can to change America. But I'd also encourage you to look at your candidates. We are nonpartisan, but look at your candidates and say, where are you in separation of church and state, and put your money where your mouth is.
And B is, I live on Maui, and I have to go back to my subject anymore, but I would like to be the representative on Maui, and I think maybe if you have somebody for each county, like, the guy or whatever.
That'd be great. No, that's terrific. I mean, tomorrow night I'll talk a little bit more about the specific structure of this. We are a federal advocacy organization, so our primary focus is Congress and the executive branch. But we encourage you to organize at the state level, and that would be part of the Secular Coalition for Hawaii. We obviously want people to be aware, here you have 2 members of Congress, to be aware of in which federal district you reside. So you obviously advocate to your 2 U.S. senators, but also to one of the 2, which is, by the way, same as Maine, we have 2, one of the 2 members of Congress and where to speak out on those issues. But also, it would be very smart, especially with the geography, to subdivide as you've just described. I'd also even start looking, this would be me, and I don't want to push on you how you decide it, but it would also be smart maybe to start looking at state senate districts and sort of know in which state senate districts people reside, because that's how the legislature decides things, is by state senate district. But I think it's a great example. I'm sorry to hear you're heading off to Maui. I wish I was heading off to Maui one of these days. Anyway, thank you so much. And number 2.
You have a very impressive slide of all these different organizations that I believe you're working with, but I noticed an awful lot of omissions, and one of my problems is I am a member of ACLU Hawaii, Freedom of Religion Foundation, the Council for Secular Humanism, People for the American Way, and Americans United. So now I got one more. Now I got Secular Coalition. Are you working with those other groups?
Yes. Let me explain the structure. Sorry, this is a question there. The Secular Coalition for America, we have supporters. So we have people who sign up for our action alerts, and I'm hoping 100% of the people here do that. And we have financial supporters, people who go online. We have different societies that people say, well, I'll give $25 a month or $50 a month or whatever, and give to our organization. But our membership officially is the 10-member organizations. And the criteria for the 10-member organizations is that they are national in scope, and they are also non-theistic. Now, that doesn't mean that we, for example, work with the ACLU. We work with People for the American Way. We lobby side by side with them and sign often onto coalition letters with them. It's just a slightly different mission, and we think it's an important one. The religious right has been represented lobbying in Washington for a long time. It is good to have someone speaking on behalf of the, depending on your numbers, 30 million non-theistic Americans. Let's have our voice in Washington. So that's really what we're about is, yes, the separation of church and state very strongly, but also the acceptance and inclusion of non-theistic Americans. That's very important to what we lobby for, and that is a unique mission. Other organizations might lobby for separation of church and state, or there might be organizations that represent non-theists, but they're more of a 501c3 mission. Ours is lobbying, public policy, and coalition building. And we are unique, I would say, as a product, if you will, in that respect, is that we bring together all these different groups. And any group, by the way, that meets those criteria, we love it. Come one point, any group that meets that. Now, the others that are, say, like ACLU, they're just not either way on religion. We would work with them, but they wouldn't be a member because they're not a non-theistic organization. But we work hand in hand with those types of organizations. They don't have an official policy. You have to say, this is our official criteria to be a part of our coalition. But that, again, that doesn't diminish our collaboration. So, thank you. And then number 3.
Okay. My message is I do for military. I have private care insurance, and I'm disabled veteran, so I have Medicaid on Social Security. So about a year ago, my doctor suggested I go for rehab. And I had a choice. I either pay for it myself or I go to a 12-step faith-based program. Because my insurance company will not pay for anything unless it's a 12-step Alcoholics Anonymous, which is faith-based. Or I have to pay out of pocket.
You know, I would love to have you in Washington. No,
I did.
Do you know Joe Gerstein by any chance? He's Harvard. What's that?
Was I drinking with him?
You know, I think I'll tell you a quick story about Joe Gerstein. Joe started a secular sobriety or substance abuse program. He was a doc, just an MD, who actually his specialty had nothing to do with substance abuse. He got involved in a lawsuit. He's a very principled guy. He got involved in a lawsuit where some pharmaceutical companies were doing the wrong thing, and he blew the whistle on it. And he ended up, things happened nicely for him as a result, but he had no idea. It just happened by accident. But he said, you know, I'm going to do something for my fellow citizens, and he's a secular American. And so he started working on secular sobriety and secular substance abuse programs. And we're going to do an action, and I'm going to try to serve you in particular because we're working on an action about this specific issue. Because SAMHSA, which I should know this, Substance Abuse Mental Health Treatment Act, or whatever the acronym stands for, there's 2 problems with that. Sometimes they have proselytizing and discrimination, just kind of like faith-based initiatives. In fact, they're kind of the prehistoric version of that because the other faith-based initiatives are over the last 10, 12 years. But the AA, as you're describing, that with government funding has sometimes happened for decade upon decade. It's unique.
I went to an AA meeting while I was under my doctor's care, and they have a book because I've been through AA back when I was a believer.
Right.
This man didn't have a Bible, and it was like a chapter Bible, and I got to walk out, and he didn't have a straight line.
And Joe Gerstein will point out, I'm sure this is what you're pointing out, is people who will say, people who are saying, geez, I'm not comfortable with this religious option. Could I please have a secular option? And you're talking to the government. And they won't offer the secular option even when they are available. Like, I gotta admit, I don't know enough about Hawaii to know the situation. But in the Bay Area, hugely populated area in California, or down in South Florida, hugely populated area, they have secular substance abuse providers.
This was in Texas last year, so.
Okay, so another population. So we're going to speak out about that issue. So in addition to proselytizing and discrimination, the fact that they're not offering secular options. And of course, in my fundamental view, they shouldn't be doing it at all. And just to top it off, because I find this particularly concerning, is, and I'm not claiming I'm a scientist or I don't do the double-blind studies. They at least did some preliminary studies. I think one was in Arizona and another one was in Scotland, where they looked at secular substance abuse treatment. And what they found was, in fact, that it was either equal to or better than the AA treatment. So this idea that AA treatment is somehow magic or superior is just not backed up by an evidence-based approach. So I'm absolutely with you, and we're going to advocate on that issue in Washington, D.C.
It was just, I was wrong.
Next number is 4. Who's 4? Yeah.
I looked into the security. I was part of the when they had the people that came from DC to go to all military installations for the last up, as the census session, so on and so forth. The feeling that I have is that the tide is going to shift. Eventually, it will go away. Like last time, I was going to take it. Is there a plan with you guys? Is there sort of like a map?
I guess the echo sort of, you said the tide is going away from what? You said the tide is going away, and
the tide, it feels to me, the tide from the military community, especially within the younger generation, the older listeners see that problem. The younger generation don't really have a problem with the whole homosexuals serving in the military sort of thing. I feel like it is going to change. It might take a little while, but the steps are in place. It's either going to happen at the court level, the Supreme Court, or it's going to happen through being pushed through Congress. Probably not that happen, but probably the Supreme Court. Is there a battle plan with the organization to sort of jump on that as soon as it pass to sort of show?
On which one? On the
Don's Hotel.
Yeah, we advocate on that now, and we'll continue to advocate with regard to that issue. The military atheists is one of those 10-member groups, so they're an official member, and I don't know how many people here. I know we have several branches represented, but I encourage you to join that group and to contact Jason Torpy, who's the president of that organization, to get involved with them. But we are already advocating on that issue. We're already advocating on the gay marriage issue. One thing that I would point out to you is one of your two members of Congress, is it Congressman He's someone. I think it's an interesting point. If you are a Republican, and we're nonpartisan as far as this is concerned, but if you take the Republican argument that you should have local control, and some people may agree, some people may disagree with that, but if you take the Republican argument that you should have local control, I find it fascinating that someone of the congressman's position and alleged philosophy would say, not we'll leave it up to the states and whether they're going to have gay marriage, or leave it up to the courts to decide whether it's a constitutional right, but instead would say we're going to create the so-called Federal Defense of Marriage Act, a federal constitutional amendment, which is what he supported. He supported that. He says we are taking away local control and imposing something that traditionally marriage laws, to the degree that they've been imposed on society, have been imposed at a local level. And that's usually the way the Republicans want it. But all of a sudden, when it comes to this, we're going to have a federal mandate nationally, not only a federal mandate by statute, but a constitutional amendment. So I encourage you to put some pressure on him and ask him why he's not consistent with that.
He was one of the few Republicans to vote in favor of repealing the National Hotel in the recent vote. In fact, it was the first vote. He just got into Congress under special election. I believe he was one of 3 Republicans to vote in favor
Good for him.
of the National Hotel. So it's,
I appreciate that vote, but I think that on the marriage issue, I think it's a good question to ask him about if he believes in local control, why this national imposition. But we should get out there and talk about the question, and we are advocating now already on Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and we'll continue to do so. Do you want to follow up?
Yes, because I wasn't really asking so much whether or not we're advocating. What I wanted to ask is if there's a plan to use it as a point for popularizing the philosophy that goes against the thing that says homosexuality is natural, whereas we are coming from a point of it is natural, it is what humans being human beings, and because I feel like that for a lot of people is a very good springboard to sort of get into, it's sort of like it is like I said, a popularization point.
You mean to sort of illustrate the point that our secular principles are correct?
Right.
Yeah. No, well, I fully agree with that. And I think that every single issue that I've raised today, and I give another talk about sex and morality, and it sort of touches more on some of these issues. But I would say with these laws, there's some consistent principles. I'm talking about privileging of religion laws, and I've only just scratched the surface. There's many of them. And a lot of them do have to do with sexual viewpoints and attitudes that are religiously based. But when you look at those, like female genital mutilation, I won't go down that path too far today, but I mean, everybody knows that there are millions of girls who are mutilated in this way, but many people don't know there's tens of thousands of American little girls who are trucked out of the country or shipped out of the country, subjected to female genital mutilation, and brought back to the United States. There's a bipartisan proposal in Congress to address that, and we're an advocate. And when you look at the common thread, they say One, it's okay for somebody to be hurt. They are treated improperly in the military, little girls are harmed, children die in vans, somebody gets hurt. And what's the justification? What is the justification for somebody being hurt? I say if you did like Einstein said, do a mind experiment, I would say do a mind experiment with this. If somebody said, I've got a 1,000-year-old document from Bosnia, and this 1,000-year-old document from Bosnia says we should harm people's rights, hurt them, that then people would say, you're crazy, and you should be put away. But if you say, it's a 2,000-year-old document, and it's magic, then politicians run screaming and say, yes, let's obey the 2,000-year-old magic document. What is this kind of reasoning? But to yes, exactly illustrate, say, their justification, the only real justification is a religiously based justification that harms others and let us move on. You know, in Maine, we have a saying, you may have heard it, sort of an old Maine saying, mind your own business. You know, sex, all this stuff. Do what you want to do, consenting adults, leave it alone. So yes, I think you're exactly right. And that's really part of our marketing philosophy, if you will. Is it very much we are straight lobbying. But let's face it, we have a different mission, an additional mission. If I were lobbying for the Engineers Association, that's fine, that's legitimate. They have one mission, and that mission is just plain old lobbying. Our mission in lobbying is a little bit distinct, because we're saying not only are we lobbying an issue, we are marketing a worldview. And I think our worldview is compassionate and decent and honorable, despite a lot of stereotypes to the contrary. And so we're using public policy to illustrate a philosophy. And I frankly think that though I'd be the first guy, lucky for you I'm not a judge, but if I was a judge and there was some cross on government land, that cross would be gone. But I don't think that has as much curb appeal to the Joe Swiggs PACs as some of these issues we've been talking about. It's that human impact. And that's what we're talking about, very important. And that's where we need you. So like that phone, you're going to call that person and say, sign up for Secular Coalition for America. You're going to get them to sign up. I'm serious about this. That's what we need. And I'm asking everyone as a favor to me, not only to sign up, but to say, hi Sean, give me your business card, talk to me about these issues, say, hey, we met in Hawaii. You know, it's not that I'm going to get to Hawaii, you know, that often as your employee in Washington. So please, give me your business card, email me when I'm back in DC, tell me fun places to go the next 3 days. But stuff like that so that we have a relationship and we're working together as a team across the entire United States and illustrating these issues in a way that has a common thread. I mean, you're raising a really good point. I mean, to go on this answer, but we just started doing web videos and where I talk like for 4 minutes about these issues. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's like talk about the issue, but also try to talk to people about what's in their hearts, about why it's important. Next number. Yeah.
I was going to ask you about the group that met with Obama's administration. Was it last year? Was that you? Was that you guys?
Yeah, February this year, February 26, 2010. That was the first time in the history of the United States that non-theistic Americans met with the administration officials. And it's a great thing. It's really a step forward for secular Americans, and I think it's a step forward for just the entire American society. You know, there's these polls that talk about where non-theistic Americans are placed and when they can be elected. And I'll tell you what, when I was in the legislature, and I admit I didn't run for office in Alabama, I ran for office in Maine. It's different. But nonetheless, I was elected, and you know, like I said, I went to Notre Dame, so I think a lot of people just made an assumption about my views because I went to Notre Dame. But as I was in office, I served 6 years on Judiciary Committee before I was on Appropriations, and then I was elected to leadership. And on Judiciary Committee, that's where you have discrimination based on sexual orientation comes to that committee in Maine. That's where you have a woman's right to choose. That's where you have domestic violence. And I mean, domestic violence, I had one guy say, not making this up, he was a minister. He said to me, I said, well, geez, you know, with the parental consent with minors, sometimes, not most, but some parents might be abusive to their girl who's in a situation like that. And they said, well, sometimes the rod must be applied. He said it just straight out. So after years of having people like that imply to me, as I'm elected official for Bangor, Maine, trying to do my best, that I'm immoral. I mean, that's what I'm trying to imply, that I was immoral because of my views about a woman's right to choose, my views about gay people. It really energized me to where I said, I wish there was some voice for me about these kinds of questions. And one time, because I was elected by my colleagues to be whip in the House, and that's nothing. Anyway, I was elected whip by my colleagues in my party, and you know how they have the session begins with a prayer, right? And so early on, it's like an official, usually it's campaigning. You're trying to get a rabbi or priest because then it makes you popular back in the district. That's what I really think it's all about. But you get late in the session, people get really busy. The session happens late at night, and it all gets crazy, right? So then they run out of clerics to do this, and they'll say, okay, you, Sean, get up and do the prayer. I'm like, okay, I'll do the prayer. So I did a prayer with Walt Whitman and Albert Einstein. I did the first non-theistic prayer to start a legislature, and like some of the folks on the Christian right side of the aisle, they send little notes over. Oh, that's not really a prayer. I was like, yeah, you're right. Deal with that. So my point is that you can be there. You can be there and you can get there. And it is scary. It is something where, I can understand how politicians would be uncomfortable. But it's not necessarily as bad as you might think. And I could have gotten elected in my home district. I think, there's a camera, so I don't know, maybe I should say this boldly, but I think I could have gotten reelected to my state legislative district pretty well for a long time, because you know why? People knew me. And I think you folks, get out there, run for your school board, run for your legislature, they get to know you and go, oh, you're a nice person. You're a reasonable person. You're trying to help other people. And they don't care that much if you say, oh, I happen to not believe in God. The Prime Minister of Australia, I don't happen to believe in God. In fact, the Prime Minister of Australia back in the 80s, Bob Hawke, I don't believe in God. And they liked him and they elected him anyway because they thought he was a decent guy. Be a decent person and run for office. That's my message. Follow up.
Can you just remind, there was a couple of bullet points that you guys hit because you have limited time.
Oh, in the White House.
So like the military.
We did the chaplain issue in the military. 3 issues we brought to the White House. The chaplain issue in the military. We brought up the faith healing issue that I described today, and that's where I described the story of Liz Haywood and who did all the horseback riding and then lost her leg. I mean, it was moving to hear her talk about the experience of what happened to her. So that was, and then faith-based initiatives was the 3rd issue we raised. But frankly, if you look at our website, we've gone from less than 10 issues to well over 10 issues, and I want to get us to up over 20 issues that all have to do with the privileging of religion. And it's all to do the right thing in Washington, but it's also to help you. So when you're having conversations with your friends, your colleagues, whoever you are, say, well, are you for this? Because my finding is when I talk to average people about it, say, are you for this? They go, oh, well, I'm not really for that.